Okay. Hi, everybody. Just wanted to get this. It's sort of like a dream diary, right? I wanted to get this down before I completely forget all the details. And this is much faster than writing or typing. As the God, if I was writing, anyway, whatever. Never mind. Doesn't matter. So, in the dream that I was having just scant moments ago, I was kind of sneaking my way through. It wasn't quite a necropolis yet, but it was on its way. It was basically a long destroyed city that had been buried, and basically an army of undead critters was unearthing it. And as they found bodies, they would reanimate them and, you know, carry on their way, add them to the army and whatnot. Um, so I was sneaking through. I don't know where I was going or what I was trying to do. And because I sometimes dream in kind of a movie style, the perspective would shift from the character that I was inhabiting at the time to like a free roaming camera that would, drift up behind him or from another character's perspective looking at him. It's a very visual style that I kind of dream in. So, the perspective was shifting. Anyway, so I was sneaking through this thing. I was in I guess, some part of the city that had been buried in like sand. It wasn't just sand though. It was a mixture of like sand and sawdust and ash, and I would have thought that it might have been like a combat arena that had been not really cleaned out very well after an especially heavy bit of slaughter was going on. Actually, it may have been a slaughterhouse that just got filled with sand or burned and then filled with whatever. Doesn't matter. It was sand and lots of particulate that was ashy and what. Anyway, but it was a big room. It was like almost like half the size of an American football field. Um, anyway, so I was trying to sneak through the thing, and there was a very, very large, like far, it was like an undead giant of some type, was kind of wandering around the other end of the room. And I was sneaking around the kind of the back wall, trying to get to a part of it that had collapsed to get down to the next level, hoping to get ahead of the excavators. I don't know why, but that's what I was trying to do. Um, and so I was almost there. I was almost to the door, and I heard this giant kind of, and he picked up my scent, and I was like, oh god! And so I just started he was looking in my direction, so I couldn't move quickly. I had to move very, very slowly. I was kind of hidden behind an ash dune or something, but if he got much closer, he'd be able to see over the top of it and see where I was. So as I was kind of like laying down, sort of crawling on my side, and I was like, I'm not going to make it to that collapsed part of the wall. I've got to hide myself right now. And so I very slowly started just kind of scooping the sand and ash and whatever, bits of, is it detritus or detritus? Whatever, that word, over the top of it, or top of me. And I just barely covered my face, and like parts of it were falling like in right into my nose. I was about to. It was like, "Don't sneeze, do not sneeze. You will die if you sneeze." And I could hear him, burble mumbling something right above me, and he just eventually whatever and turned and walked away. And of course, with every step, the stuff is like shaking loose and it's falling on my face. I'm like, trying very hard not to sneeze. But he wandered off, and I managed to slink out and get to the thing. Got down to the next level, and I could hear these kind of high pitched, not quite tittering voices, but voices that sounded very young and not undead. It was like, these voices belong to somebody who doesn't belong here, should not be here. And so they were talking about, we should grab more beans if we can. I was like, what? And it was the voices were almost androgyne. They were androgynous. They were so close. I could tell that they were male and female, but they were so close to gender neutral, it was difficult to tell which one was which. Um, but they were talking about gathering vegetables and stuff, and I was like, what in the heck is going on? So as I get down into the room, there is what is clearly this very svelte, slender, slightly blue glowing pair of individuals. And as soon as I looked at them, I knew that they were fae. They were some kind of fairy, and they were basically kind of squatting in the middle of the room with a huge crate of like string beans that they had opened up, and they were just sitting there breaking these string beans, just snapping beans and gathering them up, because apparently they found food stores that somehow hadn't rotted in the amount of time that they were just gathering food. I don't know why they were doing it here instead of anywhere else, but whatever. And so they caught sight of me and they were like, oh, it's a human. And they went back to what they were doing. And one of them, again, I couldn't quite tell which, because they almost seemed to shift gender while they were doing whatever they were doing. And they would just drift back and forth between the two. And one of them was like, well, it could be fun. And I was like, oh no, they're lust fae. There were certain kinds of fairies that draw their power from different things. These two draw their power from lust. They're sort of like succubi and incubi, but they're not evil. Well, not necessarily evil. They're self-interested. They're just interested in their own thing. They don't really want to hurt people. They just want to, they're still fae, so they're still all about tricking people and taking advantage of them. But they enjoy more if their prey survives, and they just draw off the energy of the arousal that they bring on. And it's not just like a sexual arousal, it's all kinds of arousal. If you get scared and you're just like panicking, that is a sort of a state of heightened energy, and they can draw off that as well. It's not as, for them, tasty as sexual energies and whatnot, but it's something that they can use. Anyway, so I realized what they were, and I'm like, oh, great, I don't want to have to deal with this. I've got stuff I need to do. I can't be sitting around, playing around with these two, no matter how much fun it might be. And I was asking them, I said, do you know where, and while I was in the middle of the sentence, it sort of just, and so I couldn't hear what I was saying. Apparently it's some plot point my brain had not worked out yet. And so they were like, yeah, it's further on down that way. We don't really care. I'm like, okay, fine, thank you. And as I was turning to go, we heard this shambling sort of sound. I mean, you're in Necropolis. Things shamble. That's what happens. Anyway, they were like, oh, here comes another one. And I guess I was talking to a friend of mine about Lord of the Rings last night. So I think this part of where my character, the main character, the character who's been the point of view for so much of this thing, basically threw himself to the floor and threw his cloak over him to try and hide. It wasn't wearing an elven cloak, so it's not like it, turned into a rock or something, but it did make him look like a body that had died right there in the middle of the floor. The problem is that that's what these excavators were looking for, is more cadavers to reanimate and bring into their folds. So that really didn't help very much. I mean, it made him look like not a human, excuse me, but it wasn't necessarily a good thing. It's like, okay, I don't want to look like, a piece of I'm not sure. Never mind. I'm not sure where I'm going with that. I was going to say, make some kind of a comparison to not wanting to look like, a haunch of meat, of raw meat hanging in a thing. And instead you disguise yourself as an absolutely lavish 12-course meal. Yeah. Great plan. That's not going to work worth a damn. Anyway, so that was melted ice. Sorry. So this thing, this undead, it was too too thick to be a zombie, and both mentally and physically. You know, because a lot of times zombies are depicted as sort of emaciated. They don't have a whole lot of muscle to them. They're just, you know, the shambling, rotting corpse. This thing was like an ogre. Maybe not an ogre. That's too big. Possibly an orc. Definitely not as spindly as a goblin. But whatever it was almost round in a way. It was because orc makes it sound too muscular. Doing a great job on describing here, Trent. Anyway, it was a very round. You know, in the intro cinematic to, I think it was Final Fantasy 11 or something, where it's like this. It's like the kid standing on the cliff and he's sort of looking at the tower off in the distance, and then it shows like years before when the city was attacked and he and his sister Emmeline were trying to get out. That there's a scene where these things, these very round kind of monsters are, you know, coming to. It was that shape, but undead and kind of rotting and blah blah. Anyway, moving on. So it was coming in, and it was like the character, me / whoever it was, because by this point the camera, the point of view had moved out of him so that you could see him covered up in his cloak laying on the floor, and the two Fae were just kind of standing over looking at him like, oh. And then this thing comes in, you know, from the other side. They immediately, as soon as it comes in, shift into like these almost Cenobite, you know, kind of creatures. It was just fairy glamour, but it was enough because this thing was, you know, wasn't real smart. So it starts going for the guy who's laying on the floor, and they're both like, "What are you doing?" And it stopped and looked at them like, "What is it? What the hell are you doing?" He didn't say hell, but you know, and he's like, and he sort of points at the body. It's like, you actually believe that's a human? And the guy who's laying on the floor, me, whatever, is trying desperately to hold his breath so that he's not breathing like a living creature. And one of the Fae is like, do you really believe that's a human? I said, you know, that is not how a human breathes. Do you know how a human would be breathing right now? And the Fae comes over, and it's like, we've been training this one. You know, this is a new type of I don't remember what the word was. It was some kind of an undead, but it was a word I've never heard before. So we've been training this to, you know, infiltrate and blah blah blah, whatever. And she's like, show him how a human would be breathing right now. At this point, the lungs are burning, absolutely burning, and desperate to take a breath. And I'm not going to be able to hold. Not going to be able to hold my breath for like more than 2 or 3 more seconds. And the Fae just sort of kicks at the body. It's like, show them how a human would be breathing right now. And I was like, I said, that is the sound of human fear. That is what a human would sound like. And the thing's like, oh, yeah, okay. You know, a sort of thing. And the trickery worked. You know, it believed that they were teaching this new kind of undead spy how to act like a human, so that it could get into wherever and do whatever it needed to do and kill people and make more people for the army and all this other stuff. And the other one of the lust Fae kind of walked over. I think it was the female, and she walked over and she was kind of like, she wasn't being sultry. She was being as sultry as the undead can. And she walked over and she was basically like, you know, just dripping with praise. Oh, maybe I shouldn't use that particular kind of phrase, whatever. And she was just like, you did well to spot him. You know, most of your ilk wouldn't have even noticed, but you did. So take pride in that and carry on with your patrol. And the other one, the male, kind of kicked at the body again and was like, that's enough. I was like, and went to holding the breath again while that thing just, I was like, and went shambling off, thankful for the praise and kind of shambling with a little more pride or whatever, and drifted off. And when it was gone, they both shimmered back to their regular appearance and were just giggling to no end. And they were like, okay, it's all right, now you can get up. And there was something else that we were going to have to face off against that was like right behind that guard, or maybe it was right before that guard got there. I may be doing things out of order. Like I said, the details are starting to fragment, and it's hard to remember. It may have been before he got there, but the pair of them, they had been down here so long and using their fairy glamour to disguise themselves so much that they were running low on power, energy, whatever. And the female went over and sat in a chair, and the other one, who was actually her brother, came over and sat down. Like, so she's sitting in a chair facing this way. He comes in and basically straddles her. Okay, they're lust fae. They do this kind of thing. There's basically, they get their freak on. They get charged up over it, whatever. And so he straddles her, sitting down in the opposite direction on the chair, and you could see them starting to just kind of, the blue glow starting to intensify as they're kind of getting off on each other a little bit. And I was standing not too far away, like, oh, okay. And they're like, no, it's okay, you can watch, please do. And I'm like, oh, you know, because there's that they have one of their abilities is to just create in others this kind of perverse fascination with what they're doing, and to kind of draw them in and bring up this, you know, just evoke this arousal and then just draw that energy off of people. And so that's basically, I mean, it's not that they could have done it with each other. That's a bad choice of phrasing. They could have done it by themselves. That's not real good either. You know what I mean? They could have taken matters into their own hand. This is not. Could have done it all by their lonesome. We'll go with that. But having another entity there who was like watching and being like, whoa, it just added a little bit more. Not only just a little bit more energy, but a little bit more spice. Because sometimes revulsion is just any kind of rise in emotion is what they feed on. But just freaks. Oh, delicious little freaks. They were cute. I mean, granted, of course they were. They were lust fae. They were meant to be cute. But I think, well, if they were there, being in the Necropolis, they didn't run the risk of being, I don't want to use the word tainted, but I just did. Let's say corrupted. We'll go with corrupted. If they had been hanging around like demons or devils or something, that would eventually, that's how lust fae become things like succubi and incubi. That's where they come from. They are lust fairies who become corrupted by darker powers. And if they had been around any kind of, you know, demons, they would have been at risk of that kind of corruption. But because they were running around the Necropolis, there wasn't any such risk for them. So they could go in and scavenge for whatever shinies and pretties they were looking for, and not really have to worry about, you know, losing their purity. Anyway, so what brought all this up? What is it that made this dream come together the way that it did? I think I've actually figured that out. Yesterday, I think it was Freud somebody said that dreams were like day residue or something like that. And I was talking to somebody yesterday about, there was a lot of stuff about gender equality. A lot of stuff being talked about gender equality yesterday. And then I've got a lot of friends who are either in the process of transitioning from one gender to another, or they have already transitioned. And so I was talking to a lot of them yesterday. So I think that's where the Fae and their sort of gender fluidity came from. The Necropolis, I was talking to the folks from Dead House Sonata yesterday, so that's probably where that came from. And then the green beans We went to a local Chinese restaurant for lunch yesterday, and the hostess was sitting when she wasn't working the tables. She was sitting off at another table on the side, snapping green beans. So I think that's where all this stuff kind of came together into this one dream. But that's basically what the last hour of my day has been, is this dream. Actually, the dream probably was a couple of seconds, but you know, dream time is a little bit different than awake time. So yeah, that was my dream. It was creepy and fun and weird and awesome, as dreams often are. But yeah, there you go. Merry Christmas, or some other holiday, whenever you're watching this. Yeah, be careless.